Welcome to another segment of our series, Business and Society. Today our guest is Mr. Brian Marley, retired Chief Financial Officer of Belk. I'm sure many of our audience have heard of Belk and may even be shopping there as we're speaking. And the title of our talk today is Ethical Issues in Finance. I'm sure there are plenty, and that the numbers really count. I'm just curious. We always ask our guests, what values do you see as those that sustain Belk as a company? Do they have a special set of values that they try to promulgate, to espouse in dealing with people and so on?
Sure. So first, thanks for having me, Rosie. It's happy to be here. Yes, definitely. So first, a little bit about Belk. For those that don't know us, it is at this time the Christmas holiday season, so I do hope lots are shopping at Belk. But yes, we have about 300 stores in 16 states in the Southeast and the Southwest, about $4 billion in sales, and we celebrated our 125th anniversary this year. So
congratulations.
The values really go back to our founder, William Henry Belk, who founded the company in 1888 on a very strong belief about treating a customer fairly, and grew the company by going into local markets, partnering with a local merchant in that market. So, and that local merchant was expected to be involved in the community. So very strong community involvement in how we grew up, and that has translated over 125 years into very strong values around the customer, around being involved in the communities, around how we treat people. So several things about that. We do have the standard, policies and codes of conduct that most companies have, but I think going beyond that, a culture that has grown up over many years, and I think when you think about ethics, it's really about the culture, the tone at the top, and the people. And I think policies and those kinds of things are good things to have, but you have to go beyond that. And even looking at corporate governance, and I think to a lot of people, corporate governance is, what do you do about your board? What do you do about audit disciplines? What do you do about spending policies? But it's really looking at all those things holistically and tying them together, and how it ties into the culture and ultimately the people.
Right. This question's really for our business students' ears or whatever. I'm wondering, why did you choose to go into the field of finance? I mean, what is the meaningfulness of that particular occupation? Number crunching, I mean, what is it?
Well, several things, believe it or not. I chose the field because my dad was a small-town CPA. He actually started his own firm and worked from nothing and worked very hard and grew it. And I really enjoyed watching him do that and how he interacted in the community. He really cared deeply about his clients, his business colleagues. And so I looked up to him and I wanted to do that. And he passed away when I was in college, but in college I did study accounting, and then as I went on in my career, I appreciated more and more what he did. So I did go to work for a CPA firm, KPMG, stayed there 20 years, made partner, and through that time branched out from accounting into finance and management. And then in 2000, I went to Belk as CFO. Just wonderful experience there. I did that for 13 years. The company doubled in size while I was CFO. So it was never a dull moment, and so a couple of things I would say. First of all, is the different things that I got to do over that career. Just an incredible breadth, and kind of contrary to the stereotype, very interesting. It was fast paced. It was challenging. There was lots of interesting problems and things to do. Other things that I really enjoyed about it and found meaningful was the people. And this is another thing that goes against the stereotype, but it's very much a people business. As I looked at my dad, I definitely saw that. And in my career, you know, you work with people every day, and you're in some ways a translator of these finance disciplines to help people, in their various roles. And it's also, the finance and accounting grew up as an apprenticeship business, so there's a lot of mentoring. So when I have great mentors to this day, and I also likewise have people that I mentor, and I love to see them be successful. So there's a lot of that. And then there are things, you know, you can run into opportunities to really help people. An example for me was during the recession. If you look at Belk, we have 23,000 associates, and those were and suppliers, and there's a whole ecosystem that depends on the viability of that organization, and so those were scary times. But I think we fortunately did a good job of reassuring and staying successful during that period of time. So that was a very meaningful period for all of that ecosystem.
Well, do accountants have a formal code of conduct, or do they just wing it or make it up as they go along?
Well, some may wing it, but there is a code of conduct, and CPA has to have formal training every year, a certain number of hours of training, including ethics training.
Oh, what do you do in ethics training?
We did 2 hours required every year. And this was put on, and I think it's an example of how policies and those kinds of things are important, but not foolproof. So accountants do have a code of ethics, but there have been, you know, we have had Enron, WorldCom, the Madoff scheme. You know, we've had some highly publicized and catastrophic failures where accountants were involved. Few and far between, really, when you look at, the thousands of companies that are out there over time, but they've been catastrophic, and so policies are very important, and the ethics training was actually put in after some of those issues came to light, which is helpful. But again, it has to be more, and it has to be culture, tone at the top, and a broader view.
It's sort of a pattern of always putting in the ethics training after the problem.
Right.
So some people say we ethicists or whatever, we should be out ahead of the problem rather than running after the problem. Oh, we got a problem here. We've got some rules.
Right.
Rather we should be engaging in dialogue earlier on.
Right.
You did just mention, and we might as well get into that in your long career as an accountant, you must have come across some people who weren't doing the right thing. I mean, what were some of those things, if you're free to divulge them, and how did you handle them? I mean, what do you do when you see it?
Right. Well, over a 33-year career, I did run into things, more in the public accounting career, because in public accounting you work with lots of different companies. The types of things that you will see, the most often is theft. Companies in general are designed with control systems to catch the theft. It is almost all caught sooner or later. And I've seen lots of different things, some clever, some not so clever. And so, what you do when you find it or discover that, and you can see it at any time and at all different parts, is essentially you do the right thing to find out what happened and everything that you can about what happened and why. You can see other things. Sometimes it's as simple as someone is overworked or has made a mistake and wants to keep that hidden, which is unfortunate. But again, it's important to stand up and be forward about those kinds of things. Another that you often see and really has led to some of the catastrophic failures, but also small, and you'll see this in small ways too, is sometimes a company that will make the numbers a little different from what they might be, really with an aim towards what is going to happen in the stock price. And so we've seen some catastrophic things where it's built a house of cards and it comes down tumbling in one big thing. So I guess over 33 years I've seen it all, but it's not, the examples of unethical are really, relatively few and far between. It's out there, and you just, when you see it, you just have to do the right thing and find out what you can about it and fix it.
Yeah, it's pretty limited, I would imagine. Most professions, it's pretty limited. I mean,
right.
what we like to see on TV or whatever are the scandals or the big, cover-ups or whatever. And
right.
day-to-day living, isn't like that.
Right.
You weren't just any old accountant at Belk. You were the chief financial officer. I mean, what special obligations, privileges, whatever, did that bestow upon you?
I don't know about privileges.
You
but
don't know privileges.
Special obligation, responsibility certainly. In a lot of ways that role is not any different from the roles that I had coming up. Ethically, what's different, certainly the responsibilities are bigger. I think at Belk, it was a lot easier to transition into that role because of the culture that I talked about and the system of values that's already there. It makes it easier for people to operate, and especially a CFO, you might imagine. But you do, and another thing that can make it easier is realizing the ecosystem that I talked about, the 23,000 associates, the stockholders, the vendors and suppliers, and how important that ecosystem is. And when you recognize that and filter that through your decisions, it becomes easier, I think, to make the right decisions and to do those kinds of things. I mean, the last thing I would say about that role is trust. So trust is important in any role, but extremely important in the CFO role and the finance organization of a company that has that many people depending on it. People have to trust you. They have to feel like you're going to do the right thing. And if you don't have that, you don't have anything.
Right. I mean, trust is a key virtue or whatever, which brings me to, I suppose it's a long question. I'm trying to figure out what exactly you mean or you understand by ethics. I mean, some people say, well, it's a matter of doing what's best for most people, doing the best you can for the most you can, or something like that. Other people, it's sort of like, well, it's finding out the rules and following the rules just because they're the rules, society has decided upon, assuming that the rules are good ones. We could get into a debate about that. And other people say, it's not really about rules, it's not really about regulations or principles, it's sort of about what you've been hinting at. It's about people, their character, their virtues, their integrity. So if I gave you like 1 minute to say, but I want you to take more than 1 minute, what you understand by being ethical.
Okay.
Would that first answer you give be the same if I gave you, like my students, a whole semester to figure out what they mean by ethics or by being ethical?
Right. Okay. So I won't take all day to answer the question. The 1 minute answer, I think, would be character, and character of the people. And I think it's important, it's character of the person and the individual, but also the support system around that person. And I think that's critical. So I talked about the culture and the values, and I think my family, my colleagues would be the first to say to you, I'm not perfect. but they will quickly set me straight, and have if I'm not in the best place on a decision, and I think that's really important, and I like that you brought up virtues, and I think when you look beyond, sometimes it's not as simple as right or wrong. And you mentioned that what's right for one person may be wrong for another. What's right in the short term may be wrong in the long term. So I think having a screen, and I like that you brought up the word virtues. So virtues brings in things like courage, justice, wisdom, humanity. I think it has to be that important and broad of a filter in those kinds of values to be able to make the right decisions and the most ethical decisions. And I think it is, you said right and wrong, doing the best for the most number of people. I think, and rules. It's all those things, but sometimes, just rules are not enough. I mean, we've seen people famously say, well, I was following the rules, or even more famously, I was just following orders.
Right.
But that is many times not enough, and you have to look beyond and go beyond and take all those things in consideration. But I think it keeps coming back to the virtues, the character of the people, and the support system around those people. Really important.
Yeah. A while back, you alluded to the recession and to the kind of obligations you felt to the 23,000 people that
Right.
are affected by Belk doing well. And you mentioned that Belk, did pretty well during the recession. Do you have any special reason why that happened? It wasn't so good for a lot of other companies.
Yeah, those were difficult times for everyone. I think it comes down to our people, and I think we stayed very focused, and I think our people stayed very focused on the customer as much as they could for that time. I think we had a lot of dialogue as a company. I got a lot of feedback from people within the company as to what to do, and a lot of good ideas. And I think we were more together maybe, and resolute in trying to make this as transparent as we could for our customers, although it certainly was a big issue in a challenging time. We also did some things. One very good thing I think we did was scenario planning. So at that time, it was very difficult to forecast, and so we began doing different scenarios. So what if this happens, and what if that happens, and it was more in how the company would be affected, and so that allowed us to be a little bit ahead of it, because when it did happen in that recession, most of it did happen. We knew what we were going to do, and so we focused on building liquidity, and we were successful in doing that, and that also allowed us to invest in the recession. So we invested in branding our company, we invested in e-commerce, we invested in our stores, and that then allowed us to be in a better competitive position and ultimately be successful.
That sort of leads into the next question we had talked about, is your new image, your new logo, which I rather like. I mean, that was all part of the reasoning during the recession.
Yes,
about branding.
Yes, and it had been evolving for a while. So our customer was changing, and we were changing as a result. Our customer was looking for more modern styles, more fashion-oriented. They also didn't want us to stray too far from what we had been, which is involved in our communities, Southern. So we wanted to look at how could we keep the best of what we've been, but look to the future. And so we went through a pretty intense process to do that, and involved our customers, involved our associates, involved a lot of people, and I think came up with a brand that crystallized who we are, not necessarily something way up here aspirational. I think that's maybe why it resonates with our customers. But a big part of that was crystallizing our values as a company. So we really took time to look at our values and talk about our values as a company. Be encouraging of growth and change, being committed to the success of our associates, being proud of our heritage, being involved in our communities, being relentless with customer care, and being the best at what we do. So it was also a great time to look at our values, and I think has been an important part of the success of that.
Yeah. No, it's not easy to brand. We've been through a branding kind of issues here at UNC Charlotte. When I taught at other institutions, they've been through branding exercises. It is not easy to figure out who you are and to make it visual, you know, to map it with an image or something like that. And also the importance of, you know, being modern yet retaining the Southern quality. That's not easy.
Right.
But people want you to do it all and be it all.
Right.
You said, you know, you cared a lot about the customer. Is the customer always right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely?
Absolutely, no exceptions.
You really mean that?
Absolutely. That's a founder's value.
Yeah.
Goes back 125 years. I really don't believe you can be in business 125 years or expect to be in business one more, much less 125 more, if that's not your stance. And even if it is your stance, you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. And you'd like to. That has to be your stance to get it right. And if a customer complains, it's a gift. And that's how you have to look at it, because it is a gift. They're telling you how you can be better. So they're right, always.
Always. Okay, I'll remember that.
Please.
It might come in handy. One other question, or another question I have is, you know, very publicly owned companies frequently say that they only have one obligation, and that's to their shareholders, and that one obligation is to make a profit, and profit comes before anything. Is it the same way for a privately owned company, or does it have more flexibility, or, you know, do other things enter in than profit? Or
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think for any company and any CFO, I think you know, you certainly have an ethical obligation beyond the shareholders. The shareholders are who you're ultimately responsible for, and two, but you know, I think you have to look at what I call the ecosystem, but the associates, the suppliers, and the overall health, and no matter what study you look at, or what list you look at. So if you look at America's Most Admired Corporations, if you look at Gallup's study of companies with the most engaged employees, if you look at the good to great companies, those companies that tend to look broader actually have better returns for the shareholders. And this is proven. This is what the evidence says. I think with a private company, and to be fair, we're somewhere in the middle. We have enough stockholders that we file publicly. We have an independent board, but our shares are not traded on exchange, so we don't have that quarterly release earnings and watch what happens to the stock price type of pressure. I think it does make it easier in that environment to think long term. I think some of my public company colleagues have it a little more difficult that way, but I also think that they think long term, just like, for the most part, just like I do. And I think it's important to have a long-term strategy and thinking about the health of the enterprise holistically over the long term.
Is what matters. I was just wondering, as we wrap up, and you know, take your time, what do you really want our audience to, I don't know, take away from this program about the world of finance? Numbers really count. The customer's always right. That your job is a meaningful one because of your stewardship, you know, the role of virtue. I mean, what of all these different things do you really, really want to bring home to our audience?
Well, I think particularly for the students, you know, I think we mentioned the recession. So 5 years after the recession, I think there's a bit of divide in the country and maybe even globally, and trust in some of our institutions, and we were talking before about extreme positions seeming, and I think if you look at all those things we talked about, I think getting a better dialogue, and looking more broadly, and we talked about, you know, some of the broad kind of views you have to take in some of these roles. You know, for the students, I would say get ready. I think, you know, you look at the pace of technological change, which is faster and faster. Look at some of our fiscal challenges globally. I think it's going to be there are going to be a lot of challenges, but I also think this generation of students is quite well prepared to handle it. If you look at how they handle social media, as I look at them interact, I see a lot of things alike. I see a lot of we and not me, and a lot of capability. So I think it's going to be. I think this generation is going to have a lot of challenges. I think they're also very prepared and very capable to handle it. I've heard them compared to the greatest generation. I don't know if you've heard this, but in terms of capability and challenge, I don't think that's too far afield. I do think there are a lot of people looking at this generation, and they like what they see, and that includes me.
Thank you, Brian, for everything you've said, and I hope that there's a bright future, the one you described for our students. I certainly want them to have that for themselves. Thank you for coming.
Right. Thank you, Rosie.